Good evening, my friends. My name's Eric Stark. I'm the Artistic Director and Conductor of the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir, and we're coming to you tonight from my living room, where we're going to spend the next almost an hour talking about music that we'll be performing next month when the Symphonic Choir performs Mendelssohn's Elijah with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. We'll have information on how you can get tickets and more information about the performances before we sign off tonight's broadcast. But I'm very delighted to have you with us and hope that you'll find this evening's conversation informative and interesting and help you understand and appreciate the music even more than you already will from its beautiful sounds. I'm joined by my good friend Paulo Castro over here sitting at the piano. Paulo is going to be helping us as we look in close detail at a couple of key musical elements that are a part of Mendelssohn's Elijah. But before we get to that point, it's a good idea for us to understand a little bit about what makes Elijah such a magnificent work and what it is actually. Mendelssohn wrote a couple of big oratorios during his short life, and Elijah was his second one, I dare say his most popular, premiered in 1846 at a choral festival in the United Kingdom. Now, Mendelssohn had been a scholar of the music of Bach and Handel throughout his life, studied those scores as a performer, and actually led a revival of Bach's music in his hometown of Leipzig about 20 years before, 15, 20 years before Elijah was premiered. And Mendelssohn had a deep reverence for the music of Bach and the music of Handel, and we see that a number of times reflected in the music that he wrote, especially in these oratorios and especially in Elijah. And we'll talk about that as we get into the piece just a little bit. Of course, Elijah is the story of the prophet from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament. The text is drawn primarily from 1st and 2nd Kings with some psalm texts. And Mendelssohn had help from Julius Schubring and Mr. Bartholomew in working out the libretto, both in German and English. Along with Haydn's Creation, we think of Mendelssohn's Elijah as among the first scores to be composed in a bilingual fashion, both in English and in German. Elijah is set in two big parts. The whole performance lasts a little over 2 hours, so it's a full evening's entertainment. The first part is Elijah's pronouncement of a drought, a curse upon the people who are worshiping the wrong gods, not the true Yahweh God. Part one also contains the memorable scene where he raises back to life the son of the widow, and the wonderful kind of duel between gods where Elijah and the followers of the false god Baal duke it out in musical terms. And that is a great moment in the music when you hear it. The second part of Mendelssohn's Elijah deals with the prophet's despondency and ultimately his eventual ascent into heaven. And it hints at some parallels between the Christ figure. It's an interesting exploration, if you will, for Mendelssohn, who was born into a Jewish family, but whose father converted himself and his children to Christianity, to explore kind of the duality there. That's for other scholars to explore in further detail in their own podcasts, but we'll leave it at that for now. Ultimately, Mendelssohn's Elijah finishes with a triumph as the prophet is ascending into the heavenly skies, and the chorus sings a mighty, magnificent chorus of praise, which you'll hear a little bit of with our friend Paulo. So with that said, we're going to explore a few of the musical themes with Paulo's help. So again, Paulo, thank you very much for joining us today. Paulo Castro is a wonderful musician here in Indianapolis, has been a member of the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir, a teacher and a professional musician at schools and churches around our community, and has been a good friend for a long time. So it's great to have you with us. So Mendelssohn employs some musical themes throughout his work to give it a unifying kind of trajectory that the listener can follow from the beginning through the middle and on to the end. And the first of these is what I'm calling the Elijah motive. It's also referred to as kind of the fanfare that announces that what you're about to hear is the word of God. And Mendelssohn's Elijah begins with exactly this motive. Before the orchestra plays anything, before any of the chorus or any of the other soloists sing any words at all, you hear the low brass in the orchestra play this theme. And it's a long note followed by a series of shorter notes, which Paolo's going to play for us. That motive is used, as I said, a number of times throughout the oratorio. And every time it happens, we know Elijah's about to say something important, so you better sit up and pay attention. The text that Elijah sings just after we've heard that is as follows. It's the famous, the curse of the drought. He sings, "As God the Lord of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word." So it's a very dramatic moment that starts this piece off. And Mendelssohn seizes the opportunity to heighten the drama with an important musical device that is the next motive we're going to hear. I call this, it's called the curse motive, because we think of what Mendelssohn is sharing, the coming drought, as a curse upon the people for their following the false gods. And Mendelssohn uses this. It's a very simple device, but it's very effective. It's a melody between two notes that are a tritone or an augmented fourth, or if you like, a diminished fifth apart. This is a melodic interval that sounds really dissonant and strained to our ears when we hear it. And it perfectly captures the drama of the text, this curse. And you'll hear it in the orchestra reduction that Paolo will play for you now. There's no mistaking that it's a highly dramatic moment. Thank you, Paolo. A wonderful rendition of the orchestra part right here in my living room. So the piece moves into its drama. The chorus sings, pleading for help, pleading for rain to soothe the drought, and a number of things happen, including the fact that Elijah, raises the child from the dead. And after this has happened, Elijah is ready to take on the followers of the false god directly. These are the followers of Ahab, the followers of the god Baal. And Mendelssohn is about to make a proclamation again. And so we hear the Elijah motive one more time, but it's a little bit different. And if you listen closely, I think you'll hear. Previously, we heard it in a minor key to kind of give us the dark color of the drought, of the pain that causes. But now Elijah is more confident that he is going to win this battle that's about to unfold between the followers of Baal and Elijah, the follower of the true God. And so it's in a major key, and it sounds like this. So we know we need to sit up and listen to these next words. Elijah sings, "As God the Lord of Sabaoth liveth, before whom I stand, 3 years this day fulfilled, and I will show myself unto Ahab, and the Lord will then send rain again upon the earth." And because he's referencing the original curse from the beginning of the oratorio, Mendelssohn brings back the curse motive one more time. But you can hear that he begins to resolve it, and with some consonant-sounding harmonies, some very beautiful writing, because we know that ultimately the true God will prevail and we'll get the rain that we've been after for such a long time. The next examples that I'd like to share with you show Mendelssohn's love and admiration for Bach. I mentioned that Mendelssohn was a student of Bach and of Handel throughout his life, and it should be remembered that in 1829, this is almost 80 years after the death of Bach, nobody was playing Bach's music And Mendelssohn brought it back into the public when he conducted a performance of the St. Matthew Passion. Not the complete work, but a good chunk of it. And he led a revival in the interest of Bach's music that has continued unabated to this day, almost 200 years later. And so we see Mendelssohn's reverence for Bach and for Handel, as I mentioned, a number of times in Elijah. And there's one particular moment that it just is a bullseye. Like, he is tipping his hat big time to Johann Sebastian Bach. And this comes near the, almost at the end of the second part. So we're getting near the end of the oratorio. And at this point, Elijah has been up and down with the people. And he's kind of gotten weary of they're with him and then they're against him, they're with him and then they're against him. He spends time in the wilderness and he sings a very plaintive aria called It Is Enough, where he's truly ready to kind of give up. And Mendelssohn uses as his model a very famous aria from Bach's St. John Passion that uses almost the same melody and very much the same textual meaning. Of course, the St. John Passion tells the story of the suffering of Christ as accounted in the Gospel of John. And near the end of the St. John Passion, there is a beautiful aria, Es ist vollbracht, which means it is finished, it is complete. And this is as Christ has now been crucified, that all that was prophesied in the scriptures is coming to pass. And Bach sets this aria in the beautiful key of B minor with a descending melody that we'll hear as Paolo plays. It's a very poignant moment in the St. John Passion. And Mendelssohn borrows the very shape of that melody that we just heard for the aria sung by Elijah, It Is Enough. He uses a different key. We're in F sharp minor now this time. And Elijah sings the words, It is enough, O Lord, now let me pass away, take away my life. He also uses a Baroque dance form, the saraband, in the rhythm. And you'll hear both of those together. You'll hear the very same melody, now in a new key, in the orchestral reduction that Paolo will play from Mendelssohn's Elijah from the aria. Thank you so much, Paolo. Beautiful, beautiful music and a very heartrending moment in the oratorio that I just can't wait for you to hear live and in person in the performance. So our last musical excerpt is at the end of the piece. After Elijah has suffered his despondency, a fiery chariot comes down from heaven to take him away. And we see the references to the figure of Messiah and John the Baptist in the ensuing movements. And the piece ends with a wonderful, mighty fugue set in the key of D major, I should point out, the very key that Handel uses at the end of his Messiah oratorio. And the chorus sings the text, Lord, our Creator, how excellent thy name is in all the nations. Thou fillest heaven with thy glory. Amen. And it's a beautiful, rip-roaring fugue that's fun to perform. And Mendelssohn uses the material just at the end of the fugue to resolve the curse motive that we had heard over 2 hours previously when the oratorio began. That tritone motive you will hear in the bass notes of the piano as Paolo was playing, and just in the final movement, final measures of this chorus. And instead of it unresolving and feeling dissonant all the way to the end, Mendelssohn has a beautiful chord progression that shows how that dissonance resolves into consonance, and the good news that we've heard at the end of the oratorio. So Paolo will now play the very closing measures of the final chorus from Elijah, and we'll hear that resolution of the tritone, the curse motive. 1, 2. And everyone leaps to their feet and applauds. Paolo Castro, thank you so very much. Wonderful to have your help with us today. So those are just a few of the musical examples that I wanted to share with you all tonight. Of course, there's a million of them in this piece that's just filled with beautiful soaring melodies, a wonderful message, and incredible orchestration, and amazing soloists as well. So the next thing we're going to do, this is a special treat. We recorded a conversation that I got to have a week ago with the singer who will be singing the title role in our performances of this piece in Indianapolis next month. Andrew Foster Williams is a British singer, and he was on tour performing in the north of England a couple of weeks ago, and he was kind enough to take some time to speak with us about his thoughts about singing Elijah and how dramatic it is, the interaction of the soloist, the character that he portrays with the chorus and the character that they portray, as well as some other important aspects of music and outreach and what we do when we teach music like this, when we perform music like this. So we thought it would be a great opportunity for all of us to get to know Andrew and his thoughts on this piece a little bit, and we're going to share that conversation with you now, and I'll be right back after you've watched this pre-recorded segment with baritone Andrew Foster Williams. Hello, friends. As I mentioned, we're joined by a very special guest today for our conversation about Elijah. We have our own Elijah himself, Mr. Andrew Foster Williams, who is joining us from across the pond. I'm not sure, are you in the UK or are you in Europe today, Andrew?
I'm in the UK at the moment. I'm in the north of England.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to have you with us. As I mentioned, you'll be joining the Symphonic Choir and the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra for our performances in June of Elijah, and you'll be singing the title role. And we're just so delighted that we get the chance to speak with you and hear a little bit about what in your mind makes this piece so special and performances of it so memorable. I'd like to start, if we might, just by introducing you a little bit to our audiences who may not know your work or your name just yet. Of course, you've got a wonderful career going all around Europe and around the world, including in the United States. I see that you've sung with Philadelphia and San Francisco and New York Philharmonic Orchestras, but I think this may be your first visit to Indianapolis coming up in June. Is that correct?
Yes, it is my first visit to Indianapolis, as far as I'm aware. Yes, I've probably driven through it. At some point between Cleveland and Chicago.
Sure.
So I probably drove through the north bit of it.
That's right.
Sometime in 2018, I was working for the Chicago Symphony and the Cleveland Orchestra, and I took a little road trip across. So almost. Well,
Indianapolis and Indiana are in fine fettle in the month of June. So we hope that we'll be able to show off beautiful weather and wonderful surroundings for your time here, and look forward to
I'm really looking forward to it, very much so. And I'm so glad we're able to do it eventually. You know, the pandemic has got in the way of us performing this piece just a couple of years ago, and now it's time to put all that behind us and get on with the show.
It's a concert at least 3.5, maybe 4 years in the making from our
For
first
sure.
conversations, probably. So yes, you're absolutely right. Well, speaking of kind of going back in time, I wonder, Andrew, if you could share with us maybe your first memories of experiencing Elijah, whether it was in an audience or listening to a recording or in a performance that you participated in, and what you recall about maybe the first time you became aware of the piece.
Yes, the first time I heard the piece was just before I went to college. I went to the Royal Academy of Music in 1992, so it must have been 1991, and it was for a local choral society up in the north of England, where I currently am. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a great piece. Embarrassingly, I can't even remember the name of the chap that was singing the title role, but I remember he really gave it his all, and it really made a big impression on me. And then I didn't hear the piece whilst I was at college. I was aware that I wanted to study it in great detail, but the next time I had any kind of connection to the piece was the first time I performed it, which was for myself, for a local choral society just on the outskirts of London. And I had made this decision that I was going to perform it off book. Yes, that's what I've done ever since. And now I've done the piece many, many times.
It's such a rich tapestry of actions and kind of psychology and emotional roller coaster, up and down, wonderful triumph and great trial in the piece. I've had the opportunity to prepare it and perform it a number of times, and it just always is. There's something new every time I come to it. That it's a very rewarding piece. In our earlier correspondence, you mentioned that you think of the piece really as an opera rather than an oratorio, and I wonder if you can maybe share with us a little bit your thinking about that and what you believe it is. I love that opinion, and I'm curious to hear more about what you find in the piece that makes it feel that way to you.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, as I said, my instinct many years ago when I first was preparing it for performance for myself, I understood immediately that I needed to do this. I always have my music with me, but I don't look at it, I don't refer to it, and I perform it from memory. And in essence, I think even back then I was making the subconscious decision that this felt more like an opera to me, and that these were characters, and that this particular character is essentially very, very human. And he has his frailties, he has his strengths. We see all of that in play. I think, in a way, I generally feel the piece is about humanity. It is about what we should aspire to. It's about what we shouldn't aspire to. And it just feels right that it's performed with this thought that it's like an opera, even like a play that is set to music, which is slightly different, I think, to opera. But in some ways, it's more truthful than opera can be, if I can say that. And so I find this interaction between the character of Elijah specifically and the chorus particularly effective and interesting. And, I feel that the character of Elijah and the characters of the chorus are equals in their convictions and equals in their doubts. And Mendelssohn gives us all that throughout the evening. It's very, very easy to engage with these different sentiments, I feel.
One of the highly memorable moments in Mendelssohn's Elijah is the confrontation of Elijah with the Baalites and kind of the duel that happens between not my God, or not your God, my God, back and forth. And there's a there's almost a communication back and forth between the character of Elijah and the characters represented by the chorus that's very dramatic, highly dramatic. And you mentioned specifically that moment in one of our email correspondences. It was ironic that you did that because just the day before at our rehearsal, one of our singers in the symphonic choir came up to me and he said, you know, I wonder if the person singing Elijah can kind of turn and look at us a little bit when we're singing these
Oh,
words.
yes.
And I
No,
said, well, that's not for me to say. I'm not conducting. I'm not the singer. I don't know what he'll want to do. But I wonder if you're planning to do anything like that.
very, very much so. It's very much part of, I think it's necessary. I think this eye-to-eye contact is necessary. And of course, I imagine, as is all usually the case, that we have this scenario where the soloists are at the front,
Right.
and in the middle we have the orchestra, and behind is the choir. That's the usual setup. So I often find, from the moment of "As God the Lord of Sabaoth liveth," from the beginning of this recitative, all the way pretty well until the end of the act. I call it an act. I really feel like the end of the first half. I have to have this eye-to-eye contact with the chorus. So it very much means me turning my back to the audience and having this duel, this moments with the choir. Very, 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 very clear for me that this has to be the case.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. It's such a powerful moment, but of course it's 2 hours and 10 minutes of powerful moments, one after the other, filled with drama, filled with beauty. Our performances with the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir and the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra coming up in June. We're just really looking forward to that so much. Do you have a favorite moment or a favorite couple of moments in Elijah you'd like to share with us?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I'm so glad you've given me at least two options. You've given me the option of a couple.
Of course, hard to choose,
it's
right?
It's really very difficult because it's so amazingly written. It's very clear what the motivations are throughout the piece, dramatically, humanly. It's very difficult to pick a specific moment. I think if I can pick just a few little moments,
Absolutely.
I would say that "Is Not His Word Like a Fire?" This aria is full of anger, and this emotion is so strong, and it is like a fire. It goes like a fire. I find this moment very exciting. I find it is enough an extraordinary piece. I don't know if we have a soloist playing this melody or whether it's an ensemble effort, but this is a duet almost between me and the strings. So and it's a moment of grief and loss. I find this very powerful. I find this whole duel very, very exciting, and it's really difficult. I really find it difficult. I even find the final aria is for Elijah is so beautiful and so moving. It's a tricky number to sing at the end of the evening, but the whole piece is littered with these incredible moments of honesty and truth, and honesty and truth is a beautiful thing, and even if it's horrible, even if the emotions are not so pleasant, there is still something very beautiful about honesty, particularly in performance. And so I find it very difficult to answer your question because I really feel the entire evening is honest and truthful.
That's a great way to put it. I've often felt like one of the great gifts Mendelssohn gives us is the opportunity to see kind of a superhero through a human lens. That Elijah the prophet
battles the same things that we mere mortals battle in very real ways. And we see this in his despondence in the second part, and also in his exuberance at other times. And I think that's one of the things that brings me back to the piece again and again. It's a believable character, isn't it?
It's very much a believable character. And, sometimes the piece is criticized for being a little old-fashioned or, certainly of its time. And whilst that is true, if every performer, through to every single chorus member, every single soloist, every single orchestral player, I suppose, the conductor even, if we all believe in this piece, and we truly believe it to be the honest jewel that it is, so far in my experience, it has always touched the audience in a way that perhaps they were not expecting. They weren't expecting to have the evening that they get. This is always a pleasure. You can feel this in the auditorium. You can feel this. Oh my God, this is exciting. This is real, and this is great when we have these moments on stage, and particularly if they're unexpected. And as I say, I think the piece is very underrated and undervalued. And really, if we do it with conviction, it's as relevant as anything you can find in today's music.
Indeed. Well said. We're so grateful, Andrew, to you for your time, and we promise not to take a lot of it because we know you've got a lot going on in these weeks prior to your coming to Indianapolis. But I wonder if in our closing moments together, we might expand our look out just a little bit. One of the things that's important to us at the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir, and I dare say I think important to all musicians, is helping to bring along the next generation of musicians and to foster a love of the music that means so much to us. And tonight's presentation of this outreach event online is an example of that. The Symphonic Choir works throughout the year to bring music and singing and the joy of this to young musicians. And I read a very moving account on your bio about a mentor that you had when you were young and kind of coming up in music. And it was just such a touching example of one generation leading another. I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing with us just a little bit about that story that was so moving and so special to read.
Yes, of course, with pleasure. It's interesting you mentioned it, because I'm in the north of England at the moment. I'm very near to the area where I grew up. And yesterday, without knowing you would ask this question, I visited this particular person's grave because he unfortunately died not too long into our acquaintance with each other. So it's very poignant you bring that subject up today. I grew up in a very northern poor area of the UK. It's a brilliant place, but it's not a posh place. And in terms of music and culture generally, there was a huge tradition in bygone years. In certain areas that got left behind. I didn't feel particularly as if I had a lot of musical influence in my early years. And so what I did do at school was I was an avid member of the drama department of my school. And my drama teacher wanted to put on a production of Gilbert and Sullivan's The Gondoliers. I don't know whether this kind of musical culture travels over the pond, but Gilbert and Sullivan is a huge thing in the UK. Sure. So we were required to sing. And I was playing one of the main roles. And so with no musical background, my drama teacher gave me a cassette, which tells you my age, or more or less what my
I
age
remember
is.
cassettes.
You remember those things? And asked me to just learn it from this cassette, because I couldn't read music. I didn't know very much about it. So I did that. And I think I just mimicked the sound I was hearing. And I would have been 15 at the time. But she thought it was very interesting. And so she got a peripatetic teacher. Does this term exist in the US? From Manchester, the nearest city, to come and have a listen to one of the performances. And this was this wonderful man, Roy Dillon. And he came to one of the performances and was very insistent afterwards that I study this more. And so he agreed to teach me free of charge for a couple of hours a week, to teach me to read music and to teach me to sing. And he was very, very insistent that I do it. And even though I'd already fallen in love with the art form, I was a little bit reluctant. And so, but he continued to press this, that it was very necessary. And thank God he did. And unfortunately, he died just 18 months later of leukemia at a very young age. Wow. And that was traumatic, but you know, that obviously that relationship is very special to me. And you are absolutely right that these people need to exist in the world to pass the baton on to the next generation. And I have faith that this will continue in the future. I sincerely hope so. All around the world, it's very necessary.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. No doubt he's smiling with pride down upon you each time you take the stage, and no doubt when we join together with you in June. Andrew Foster Williams, it's been a pleasure to talk with you today. We thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for organizing this. It's a fantastic idea. And please, chorus members, please, let's bring this alive. Let's do it.
We can't wait to put it together with you in just about a month's time in Indianapolis with our friends at the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra and conductor June Merkel. It will be a pleasure. Andrew Foster Williams, thank you so much for being with us today. We can't wait to see you next month.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There was something I keep showing that. Our thanks to baritone soloist Andrew Foster Williams, who will be featuring with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra Symphonic Choir as he sings the title role for Mendelssohn's Elijah in our performances just about a month away. He spoke very compellingly near the end of our conversation about the mentor in his life that helped him find his path to music. And I find that to be such a powerful message, and one that we at the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir take very seriously. We've been given opportunities to perform and to share our music making with our community in ways that we think can help the next generation of musicians, conductors, teachers, performers find their way to things that they love and things that are important to them. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity for us tonight to take a little bit of time out of our conversation and share with you some of the outreach work that the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir does. And in particular, we're going to focus on one element of our outreach plan, and that is our conducting fellowship. 12 years ago, Indianapolis Symphonic Choir partnered with Butler University to create a position of a conducting fellow. This is a 2-year appointment that coincides with a graduate student's work in the master's Master of Music program at Butler University when they're studying choral conducting. And we just happen to have our current conducting fellow, Mr. Alejandro Reyna, with us tonight. Welcome, Alejandro. Good to have you with us. Alejandro's been in the position of conducting fellow for the last 2 years, and so he's nearing the end of his tenure. We're sad to see you go, but we know that you have great, great things ahead of you. And as luck would have it, of course, Alejandro's been with us during a very unique time in everybody's lives, and certainly in the life of choral musicians, and as we've navigated the challenges of the pandemic. And we'll ask him a little bit about that. But before we get to that, Alejandro, I'm wondering, could you just tell us a little bit about your own musical and leadership background, where you were before you came to Butler and to the Indianapolis Symphony Choir?
Thank you for having me. So I was at Wabash College, graduated there in 2013.
I've heard of it.
You have. And then I ended up working there for 3 years. I was a music composition major and worked in higher ed there in the career services. And then I continued taking voice lessons and ended up applying to a couple graduate schools for conducting and ended up at Butler. So I was Glee Club intern the 3 years after I worked there and associate choir director of First Christian Disciples of Christ Church there in town. Yeah.
Wonderful. And as I mentioned, the time that you've spent with us has included COVID time. But I wonder if, apart from that, you can give our audience an idea of what it is that you do kind of week to week in your position as the conducting fellow, and then any surprises or special things that we've had to deal with in the past time.
So week to week, I make and create the seating charts, set up the rehearsal rooms, and then wherever we're not in the rehearsal room and I'm not singing in all the productions that we're part of, we really get to learn about the ins and outs of a non-for-profit professional arts organization. So in the staff meetings, learning about, we're planning things from 2 years out from now, and especially next year with the commission piece and how much work goes into putting that together, as well as just the next couple seasons. And then, the day-to-day things of hearing from our singers, why they can't make some certain rehearsals, and so adjusting our rehearsal plans and going forward. Of course, I get to conduct a piece in the Festival of Carols, which I did this last year, and the year before when we had our virtual, as well as getting to do some warm-ups and rehearsal time with the symphonic choir.
As you mentioned, the position is primarily focused on kind of the administrative responsibilities. So when we go to school for graduate programs in choral conducting, we're learning a lot about the gesture and about the music and this sort of thing, but we don't spend a lot of time studying how to run a business. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to, is grant writing and fundraising and audience development and all of those kinds of things, working with the board of directors. But we do like to share podium time with our conducting fellows, and Alejandro certainly has earned his opportunities. Tell us, you conducted the full choir on a Festival of Carols. Had you conducted a choir of that size ever before?
I had not, 120 plus singers,
He did a wonderful job leading a beautiful a cappella piece, Even So Lord Jesus Quickly Come. What were the takeaways from that experience? Do you remember any particular aha moments or surprises?
Yeah, I mean, just stepping in front of the choir for the first time this past fall, they're so responsive. They're all very smart and talented musicians and choristers, and so every single movement you make up there with your hands and your gesture and your body, they read into it because they have you and Michael Davis. So it really challenged me to be very clear with my gesture and body, specifically that piece, the piece and the hope that comes with it, so that it's 120 singers and they all need to see from the conductor and the director what it is they should be singing about. And it's also a piece that a lot of them knew from memory, so I'd be extra clear because we were all singing it a bit different than they had in the past. So clarity in my gesture and my direction just in the rehearsal room.
There's nothing like getting in front of a group of musicians and finding out if your ideas are being communicated through your gesture or not. He did a really great job, And I want to say, Alejandro, a big, big thank you to you. Especially during the pandemic time, when we all had to pivot to online activities as opposed to in person, your technical expertise and your know-how and your ability to help us problem solve and troubleshoot and bring new programming online very, very quickly was a huge part of our success. As many of you know, we had a number of virtual choir performances that were available online, but we were also having weekly Zoom meetings with the full choir and workshops with DEI consultants and guest speakers. And Alejandro was a key part of the success of all that. So we're really grateful to you for helping us at a time that we really needed it. Because of you, we were able to keep the group feeling together, despite the fact that we were all stuck in our homes for months at a time. What's next for you, Alejandro?
So we have Elijah in June next week. This weekend, actually, we have a performance at Ball State with Hal's Requiem and Benjamin Britten's Te Deum. And then next week we take that to Carnegie Hall. So got that to look forward to, as well as music festival later in the summer that I'm participating in.
Yeah, may I say where it is? It's one of the big ones, the Aspen Music Festival. Alejandro was selected to be a chorister and study professional chorister life in a new program that's only a few years old out there. So we're really proud of you, and we know that you'll represent us well. And we thank you again, Alejandro, as you're in the waning weeks of your time. You know that the activity is still going like this.
That's right.
Ball State and New York City and ISO with Elijah. But we're just really grateful to you for all that you've done for us, and we wish you the very, very best. And we know we'll be cheering for your many successes for years to come. Thank you. That's about it for us tonight. Before we sign off, I just want to thank you all for joining us and give you some of the pertinent information about the performances of Mendelssohn's Elijah that are coming up, so that if you don't have your tickets already, you know how to do so. The concerts will be June 17th and 18th at Hilbert Circle Theater in downtown Indianapolis. And this will be featuring the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir, the Indianapolis Children's Choir, a cast of wonderful soloists, including our new friend, Andrew Foster Williams, whom you've already met, and conductor June Merkel. Tickets are available on the Indianapolis Symphony website at indyorg.org or at their box office if you happen to be downtown. And it will be an uplifting and memorable occasion as we celebrate a concert that has been almost 5 years in the making. These performances were originally scheduled to happen in June of 2020. And we all know what actually happened during that time. So we're thrilled to have the opportunity to bring them to you, the members of our community, and to sing this beautiful music for you. We invite you to stay tuned to the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir website at indychoir.org. Sorry, my brain just checked out there for a moment. indychoir.org for important announcements about the things that we're doing next season, including a wonderful world premiere of a commissioned piece written for us by Augusta Reed Thomas. We thank you again for your support of all the arts in Indianapolis and your support of the Indianapolis Symphonic Choir. And we look forward to seeing you at our concerts in June and the performances coming in the seasons ahead. Thanks very much. Have a great evening.